अत्र भवतां स्वागतम्। इदानीं तृतीये दिवसे कार्यशालायाः पञ्चमं सत्रम् आरभ्यते। केषाञ्चित् यदि भगीरथ नंदी महोदयानां माइक म्यूट् इदानीं जातं, तेषां माइक अन्म्यूट् आसीत्, तेन महान् व्याघातः भवति स्म। तृतीयस्य दिवसस्य कार्यजातम् इदानीम् आरभ्यते। पञ्चमं व्याख्यानं धर्मशास्त्रे वादाः इति विषयम् अधिकृत्य आरप्स्येत। So the fifth lecture will be on Vāda in Dharmaśāstra. And anyway, प्रथमं तावत् एतद् विचारणीयं भवति. We have to admit, as I am admitting whosoever is coming in the waiting room, so we have to admit that there is a very rich tradition of Dharmaśāstras, and there is plurality and multiplicity in the whole textual tradition itself. वैविध्य और बाहुल्य धर्मशास्त्र के क्षेत्र में हम देखते हैं। एक धर्मशास्त्र नहीं है। जिस प्रकार से केवल एक कोई धर्म ग्रंथ हमारा नहीं है, पूरी हमारी सनातन धर्म की परंपरा में अनेक धर्म ग्रंथ हो सकते हैं। और मैं यही मानता हूं कि बौद्ध धर्म भी हमारी परंपरा का धर्म है। उनका धर्म ग्रंथ यदि कुछ भिन्न है तो वो भी हमारा धर्म ग्रंथ है। जैन धर्म भी हमारी धर्म परंपरा का अंग है। उनका यदि धर्म ग्रंथ भिन्न है तो वो भी हमारा धर्म ग्रंथ है, भारत का धर्म ग्रंथ है। पारसी देश में निवास करते हैं, इस देश के नागरिक हैं और उनका सम्मान होना चाहिए। बहुत बड़ी समस्या है। मैं तो कुछ पारसी लोगों से मिला हूँ, मुझे बहुत ही व्याकुल होता है चित्त कि किस तरह से संख्या उनकी कम होती जा रही है। बड़ी परंपरा उनकी 1000 साल से ज्यादा पुरानी इस देश में है। संस्कृत के पंडित उन्होंने दिए इस देश को, अपनी धर्म परंपराओं को उन्होंने संस्कृत में रूपांतरित किया। और वो धर्म परंपरा जो कि महाभारत में रिकॉर्डेड है कि जरथुस्त्र का धर्म है, जिस पर हम कल बात कर चुके हैं। So that the Dharma Grantha of Parsis should also be regarded as Dharma Grantha of India. And whosoever is a citizen of India and whatsoever dharma he is following, his Dharma Grantha will be the Dharma Grantha for us. So there cannot be a single Dharma Grantha for India, for Indian culture, for Indian religious tradition. Just as there is no single prophet. In other tradition, there may be a single prophet. If at all we consider that there are prophets in India, so there is no single prophet. The prophet word is unknown. We have seers. And there is no single seer. Thousands of seers are there. And seers can be born even in 20th and 21st century. So there is no single Dharma Grantha. In the same way, there is no single Dharmaśāstra as well. So the text, the tradition itself recognizes the plurality and multiplicity of the whole Dharma tradition, Dharmaśāstra tradition. Kautilya, this is the passage from Kautilya. Kautilya says that there are diverse views of Dharmaśāstra text on the number of Vidya. This is the these are the elementary lines beginning para from the first adhikarana from Kautilya's Arthashastra, Adhyaksha Prachar. So some say that there are 3 Vidyas. Then Manu Dharmaśāstra accepts 3 Vidyas plus Dandaniti. Then there are 4 Vidyas. The other view in other Dharmaśāstras is that Anvikshiki can also be accepted. Some say that Anvikshiki is a part of Trayi. This is another view. Brahaspati's Dharmaśāstra, Brahaspati also had written a Dharmaśāstra. And Ravana was a follower maybe of Dharmaśāstra in a tradition, because in Bhasa's play, Ravana appears as a Brahmin priest before Rama, and he says that I have studied Dharmaśāstra of Brahaspati. So Bhasa knew about the tradition of Dharmaśāstra of Brahaspati, and that might have been might be a part of curricula, Brahaspati Dharmaśāstra also. And the Brahaspati Dharmaśāstra has a very peculiar view of the whole Vidya tradition. They altogether discard the Trayi concept. So Trayi is not a part of our curricula. It separately, independently, because it can be included in Dandaniti. So Dandaniti is only Vidya, and it will include all other Vidyas. Governance, polity. To learn governance, polity, administration, you have to learn all other Shastras. And these are the Charvakas. They are talking about this world, Ihaloka, and how to run this Ihaloka properly. So all other Vidyas should be considered a part of this Ihaloka Vidya, Laukik Vidya. And the Upanishads also say that they are a part of, even Trayi is a part of Apara Vidya. Para Vidya is different. So you cannot say that this view is untraditional. It cannot be accepted in the tradition. It is also a part of the tradition. And they say that Lokayatra is very important. And Lokayatra incorporates whatever Vidyas are there. They talk of Lokayatra, of this world, the life in this world. Therefore, those who were talking mostly of the other world, they were tempting people that you will be in the other world if you do this punya. That also has its own value, I agree. But those who are insisting that we first improve this loka, ihaloka, we talk about the economy, the better conditions of the people of this loka. That is what the Charvakas were doing. And that is why the one Charvaka should be there in the cabinet of a king. That was the tradition. Jabali is a Charvaka Matanuyai, and he is a Amatya in Dasharatha's ministerial officers. Up to 11th century, this tradition continues, because I am told in history that Karnataka, the kings of Karnataka used to have one Charvaka philosopher in their cabinet, in their Amatya Parishad. So Charvaka had its own importance. We shouldn't altogether discard it. And Dandaniti, there is a school of Ushnas, Shukraniti, and I will come to it. There is a text, Shukraniti, although it's a later text. But Ushna or Shukracharya is said to be a great Dharmaśāstracharya. And he also said that Dandaniti is only one Vidya. And Kautilya gives his own view that 4 Vidya should be there. So right from Hori past, the tradition says that there is no single Dharmaśāstra. And all the Dharmaśāstra should be referred, just as Kautilya does. That is referring to the views of all other Dharmaśāstras and then deciding. This is the Samvada. That is why I say that Arthashastra is a great Samvada text. It's a text structured in dialogues. So plurality and multiplicity is a mark of this whole tradition. And I will, this is just the translation of the passage I have read. I will omit it. And this tradition continues till medieval times at least. Later on, there was a unitary view of the whole tradition. With colonization, this unitary view, the linear view of time, the linear view of life, they insisted on it. There is only one language because God created one language, they say. Our seers say, Janam Vibrati Bauda Vivachasam Nana Dharmanam Prithvi Yathaukasam. On this earth, that is Bharat Vasundhara, so many people speaking in so many languages and following so many dharmas live. Crores and crores of people following so many dharmas and speaking so many languages, they live right from Hori past. Sanskrit alone was not the language. There are several other languages. This is what the Vedic seer is telling. So the whole concept of Indo-European linguistics, that there was one language in the beginning, this was given to us by our colonizers. And that has become a big problem with us. If I say that Sanskrit was not the only language, people will say that I am a Sanskrit Virodhi. ये तो संस्कृत के शत्रु हैं. But we have to examine what the seers are talking about. They are talking about a multilingual structure in the country and a multi-traditional setup of this country. And there are so many Dharmaśāstras. So in 10th century, Rajshekhara also refers to all these Dharmaśāstrācharyas. And in the same way, he follows Kautilya. And then the beauty of it is that an Acharya of 10th century says that I myself is a Shastrakara. So I can declare that this 4 Vidya paradigm, I refuse. I say that there is a Panchami Vidya. The Sahitya Vidya should be incorporated in the gamut of 4 Vidyas. He declares, and he gives very logistically, he proves that without Sahitya, you cannot have a proper understanding of Vedas. You should know the Alankaras. You should know the aesthetic theories to understand mantras even. Otherwise, you will not be able to unravel the mantra Dvasuparna Saija Sekhaya, the whole metaphor of 2 birds. You can't properly understand unless you know the Kavya Mimamsa, the analytical method in the aesthetic and poetic theories. So he says that Saptamam Vedangam Alankara Shastram. If there are 15, if there are Chaturdash Vidyas, the 15th Vidya should be the Sahitya Vidya. And if there are 4 Vidyas, then Panchami Sahitya Vidya should be accepted. Then very logically, this is Vāda. Rajshekhara proves that this Panchami Sahitya Vidya has to be accepted. And he is very convincing. What happened as I am talking, that with the advent of East India Company and arrival of the Britishers, this whole multi-layered structure of our tradition was being eroded, and they became the rulers. And when Warren Hastings became the Governor General of West Bengal, he tried to systematize our tradition, our legal system, and Vādaām Setu, a voluminous text, was prepared with the help of 50 Pandits. That was the beginning of dialogue between the Europeans on one hand and the traditional Sanskrit Pandits on one hand, on the other hand. And Warren Hastings was a great personality who contributed for making of these dialogues. Despite his colonial outlook and his limitations, and he was charged, and there was a case against him, all those. But Pandits had very high regard for him. They wrote prashastis. They gave him felicitations, prashasti patras. The traditional Pandits of Kashi, they were enamored of Warren Hastings, what he did. because he was a lover of Sanskrit anyway, and he worked for the propagation of Sanskrit also amongst the Europeans, his officers. So, but what happened? That there is William Jones. William Jones is a great scholar, Mahan Medhavi Pandita. Tasya yavati prashansha kriyeta tavateva alpa syat. But when William Jones starts a legal system here, he creates a legal system. He is the chief judge in the Supreme Court or High Court of Calcutta. So he asked the Pandits, what are the Dharmaśāstras? You tell me one Dharmaśāstra. So they tell him about Manusmriti. He translates Manusmriti into English. And he insists that Manu Samhita is the only Dharmaśāstra. But this is not true. There is Yajnavalkya also, there is Parashar also. So this concept that Manu is the only Dharmaśāstrakara for us, this was given by our colonizers. Before that in Bengal, Yajnavalkya Smriti was more prevalent. Yajnavalkya Smriti and Mitakshara Tika, that was more prevalent because Yajnavalkya is much more human in several respects. In the matter of women, he is more considerate. So in Bengal, they were following this Mitakshara and this Yajnavalkya Smriti. But unfortunately, the system which came into work with the advent of the Britishers, their Manu became the only source for all judicial system. And for Islam, Shariat was there. So they divided. They were not ruling, giving verdicts through one text for all. That was another bad thing in the system. So they divided the legal system for Hindus by Manusmriti, and the legal system for others through their systems. So this divide was created, and this was a very a deterrent for the understanding of the right perspective of our tradition, because there were alternate systems apart from Manu. And I have reasons to believe that there was never a time when Manu only was the Dharmaśāstrakara in India. Kalidas must have said, Rekha Matramapi Kshunna Damanor Vartmana Param. That was because he is speaking for the Gupta kings or for Vikramaditya in 1st century BC, whatever be his time. But that is restricted to the practice of the region where Kalidasa is speaking about, maybe at Ujjaini. There are other regions, because Manu talks that in Aryavarta his system will be prevalent. What about the other regions? Aryavarta is limited up to Himvad Vindhya Antare Ya Desha Himvad Vindhya Madhye. So beyond Vindhyachal, what are these Pratis? There was Agastya who migrated to south. There were other seers who are living in south and they are writing. There are several Smritis from south. And in diverse regions, the diverse Smritis are being followed. But the real practice was that a king would assemble the learned scholars of his kingdom, his state, and he would ask them to prepare a Dharmaśāstra for his administration. And they did it. Compiling, sometimes they compiled Adi Dharmaśāstra like Veer Mitrodaya, like Vyavhar Mayuka. This is being done by the orders of the kings. The king of Orcha wants that a compilation should be there, so that there are no controversies. We can consult Adi Dharmaśāstras and decide. Right up to 18th century, India is accepting this plurality, that there is not a Manu, a Yajnavalkya. There are hundreds of Dharmaśāstras. So this Veer Mitrodaya and Vyavhar Mayuka, they are compiled out of hundreds of Dharmaśāstra texts, and out of them they chose from out of their discretion, they decided what verdict to give. That was our system. So this plurality which rested on the discretion, on the human values, that was lost with the advent of Britishers in India. Professor Ashutosh Dayal Mathur is an expert in the field. I am just doing an anadhikar chesta. And today what happens that if Shatavdhani R. Ganesh joins. I requested him to join. Unfortunately, I forgot about him. Sometimes we forget the persons who are very close to us. So I suddenly remembered of him and requested him to join. He said, only tomorrow I am free. He said that he will be joining. So far, I don't see he is here. But if he joins, I would like him to say something. Then Barkhedi ji said that he will be coming. Yesterday, he said that he will be coming tomorrow. So if he comes, I will have to make some room for him to speak. So I will cut short my first lecture by 15 minutes. Maybe I try to finish within 45 minutes. The second lecture also I will finish in 45 minutes. And if the two experts who are not present so far, if they appear, I would like to hear them. Perhaps you people also would like to hear them. So the time for the two experts, Professor Ashutosh Dayal Mathur and Professor Kala Acharya, will remain as it is. I'm cutting short some time from the discussion and from my own lectures to enable us to hear these two very esteemed experts, if they at all come or join. I hope they will join. So what are the debates that are taking place in different Dharmaśāstras? Now, my submission is that when we talk of Dharmaśāstra tradition in India, we should never say that Manu is the only authority. There are several authorities and we consult all of them and we decide. We are the persons, the intellectuals, to decide. Otherwise, there is a constitution, follow that. That is, the country is being governed by that single constitution. I also believe in that. But for our Vimarsha also, we have to accept that there are so many Dharmaśāstras and we have to believe in the better wisdom of all these Dharmaśāstrakaras. So several debates are happening, Vādas and Samvadas are happening, and there are several issues between them, and they are having dialogues in between them. Sometimes they are referring to the earlier Dharmaśāstrakara, like Kautilya refers to more than a dozen authors of Dharmaśāstra texts. And Vatsyayana, even in his Kama Sutra, Vatsyayana does the same thing. He refers to so many other authors in the field. This was the tradition that whenever you are writing a Shastra, you are accepting the multiple tradition of that Shastra. There are so many other Shastrakaras whom I have to enter into dialogue with. So one of the debates is which ashrama is the most prominent, should be regarded as the most preferred ashrama, you can say, or most supportive of all. So naturally, Manu would say that Grahasthashrama, Tasmat Jeshthashramo Grahi. This is what he says, and maybe the other Dharmaśāstrakaras agree with him, because the whole Dharmaśāstras speak about the Pravritti Mulak Dharma. They are not speaking about the Nivritti Mulak Dharma, but there may be other authors who might be creating their own smritis. So they may not be agreeing with this view. Shankara, naturally, he had to dispute with the authors of Dharmaśāstras like Manu, who gave the highest status to Grahasthashrama. This was one debate. Then there are debates about caste and untouchability. Many unpleasant things might have to be said in this area. And I believe in what Gandhi said. And he said that if somebody believes in untouchability, he is not at all a Hindu for me. अस्पृश्यता में जो विश्वास करता है, मैं उसको मानता ही नहीं हूं कि वो मेरे धर्म का अनुयायी है. I believe in what he says. But Dharmaśāstrakaras give very strict rules for the Brahmins, the learned ones, for following this asprashyata, you can say. And there are debates. And Govind Chand Pandey, who is a great traditional scholar, one of the greatest scholars of our times, he has a radical view, and he connects the restrictions as specified in Apashutradhikarana. This is an adhikarana in Brahma Sutra. It is quite possible that all the traditional Pandits and all Pandits of Sanskrit might be agreeing with this Apashutradhikarana of Brahma Sutra. I have high regards for them, but I don't agree. I agree with Govind Chand Pandey. So he says that Apashutradhikarana is specified in Brahma Sutra. The restrictions in it are there to the desire of the priests for preserving their leadership. A reactionary outlook also emerged due to the challenge from Buddhism. These are his views, which present a kind of analysis why this untouchability idea became so much rigidly followed. There is no doubt that the liberal view of the caste and religious rights was current even within the orthodoxy in this age, and it is proved by the Mahabharata. Jati Ratra Mahasarpa, these lines spoken by Yudhishthira, that you can't insist that there is a jati, single jati, and these are the Brahmanas only and these are the Kshatriyas only. There is always a mixture. So many peoples coming from other countries in India, they are mixing, and some of them become Brahmanas, some of them become. This is happening right from the times of Mahabharata, and still these peoples in 17th, 18th century having debates where Kayasthas are Kshatriyas, whether Bhonsles are Kshatriyas, whether Shahu Maharaj is a Kshatriya. What nonsense! Mahabharata, you are rejecting Mahabharata and Vyasa, and you are rejecting the wisdom of Yudhishthira, who said that the mixing of caste is going on right from Kori past, and you can't say that they are only the Brahmanas and they are not the Brahmanas. But the debate continues, and there is Gita. So either you say that Gita, I don't believe in Gita, Chaturvarnyam Maya Srishtam Gunakarma Vibhagasha. So a question which I often ask the persons who say that Gita is such a Mahagrantha, I just ask them, was there a time in India when this practice of Chaturvarnya as per Guna and Karma was prevalent? This is a very sorry state of affairs. This may be a very bitter truth, you can say, बड़ा कटु सत्य हो सकता है, लेकिन कोई मुझे बता दे कि भारतवर्ष में, इस महान परंपरा के देश में, 10,000 सालों के इतिहास में कोई ऐसा समय रहा है जबकि जो जन्म से ब्राह्मण है, ब्राह्मण के घर में पैदा हुआ है, और यदि दुराचार अनाचार करता है तो कोई एक रजिस्टर होगा राजा के यहाँ, जहाँ उसकी जाति शूद्र घोषित की जाएगी और कहा जाएगा कि ये आज से शूद्र ही माना जाएगा. ए पर्सन बाय गुणा एंड कर्मा एक्टिंग लाइक ए शूद्रा will be officially declared as Shudra. Was there a system anywhere in any time in India? That is the question. If we say that we are so great, our culture is so great that we believe in the Gunakarma Vibhagasha theory, but what about the practice? Was there a time in practice in any age that the Etre Mahidasa is a Dasi Putra and he is expelled from the arena of Yajnavedi, he can't enter. It is true that later on he performs a big penance and he becomes a Vedic seer, and there are other Vedic seers also. Some 2-3 names we cite, but they are exceptions, you see. They performed great penance, they had made great sacrifice, and ultimately the society had to agree. But there might have been thousands and thousands of people who are acting in an improper way, unbecoming of a Brahman, but they are Brahmanas. And there may be thousands and thousands of Shudras who are pious and religious, and they are noble by character, but they won't be considered as Brahmanas. And this has happened in this country for thousands and thousands of years. These are very, very unhappy truths about it. When we say that we are great and we have this great culture, we have to consider either we enter into debate, you convince me, otherwise this question remains for me. मेरे जैसे अज्ञानी प्राणी के सामने, मतिमंद प्राणी के अल्प बुद्धि में ये सवाल उठता है. And because Professor Ashutosh Dayal Mathur is actually the expert in the area. So we will depend on what he says. Then I will cut it short. Many things, some texts we have discussed. There is Kamlakar Bhatta, author of Nirnay Sindhu. He is writing Shudra Kamlakar. What will be the rituals for the? They are considering Shudras as separate. Their rituals are separate. They are segregated in a way, and that is why Ambedkar is there. Otherwise, by Acharana, you see, such a great scholar. Very few scholars are to his standing, but they had to suffer. You have to agree. You just read their autobiographies or biographies, you will agree that what they had to suffer. So these are bitter truths, of course. But what happens in our world, that we are living in a very sweet world of ours. We are the Pandits, we are pious, and we forget about the others, the whole milieu. Sometimes it happens. So this is the question. Is it that it is the time for the Sanskrit Pandit world to awaken and consider the ground realities in their this world, this great world of theirs, this great world of Shastra Parampara. So then up to 20th century, this tradition amongst the Pandits continues. The Dharmaśāstra Pandits, these professors of Dharmaśāstra in our Sanskrit universities, they are writing or editing Shudranik Paddhati. So they consider that we have to segregate the Shudras and decide the rights differently for them. So what about the Gunkarma Vibhag, and what about the whole system of Krishna, what he was speaking? Nagesh Bhatta, such a great scholar, one of the greatest philosophers and grammarians in India. He earlier also Professor Madhav Deshpande talked about this Vratya Prayashchitta Nirnay. So the Vratyas are, and this the institution of Vratyas, you see, in Atharva Veda, Vatya is equated to almost Parabrahman. Vatya is such a great personality there. In Atharva Veda, there are 2 suktas on Vatya. Sa Mahatim Disham Vacharat, sa Brahatim Disham Vachalat, Tamcha Sarve Deva Anvagachan. They say this Vatya became so great there. And Vatya is actually Savitri Patita Vipra, according to Manu. So these are the traditions, but now Vatya becomes such a degraded, derogatory term. In Atharva Veda, he is a revered person, and there is the whole community of Vratyas, which has an important role to play in the society, and they are so much being condemned. So anyway, Prayashchitta course is there for them, and texts are there for Vratya Prayashchitta, and I will omit these. So many texts on the question whether Bhonsles are Kshatriyas or not. Krishna Narihari Das in Akbar's time returns Shudrachar Shiromani, and then the debate continues up to 20th century. Even when Shivaji is considered as one of the builders of nation, the debate among Sanskrit Pandits up to 21st century continues whether he was a Kshatriya or not, whether it was proper to coronate him through Vedic mantras or not. Even after the greatest Dharmashastri of Kashi, Gaga Bhatta, wrote a new Dharmashastra to coronate Shivaji, he was such a radical person, one of the most traditional Dharmashastris of Kashi. Even after that, the debate continues. It's a good thing. Let the debate continue. But the questions, the counter questions also should be tolerated by them. And I say that you are not aware of the ground realities to such persons. So, okay, Kayas Dharma Pradipa was written by Gaga Bhatta in reputation to Shudrachar Shiromani, and okay, Vinay Gopal Tripathi ji, and so many other things are there. I will skip over many things. Shahuji Maharaj, you see, wonderful thing is that Appa Shastri Rashi Vadekar, who is a Swatan, अपना माइक बंद कीजिए, कौन है ये? Appa Shastri Rashi Vadekar, who is a Swatantra Sagram Senani, a great journalist, the editor of Sanskrit Chandrika and Sunrat Vadini, he was against Shahuji Maharaja to be considered as a Kshatriya, and he is living under his patronage, publishing his journals in Kolhapur. And he wrote articles against Shahuji Maharaj that he is not a Kshatriya, he should be considered as a Shudra. And the other Pandit, maybe Bhandarkar and Satwalekar. Satwalekar, what? Is he not a great Pandit? Is he not one of the greatest Vedagyas of our age? He is saying, he is writing articles on Shahuji Maharaja, supporting his Kshatriyahood. So this debate continues, and in Dharmaśāstra tradition, and the continuance of debate is beautiful, but prevalence of one view and erosion of other views is devastating, which happened in the colonial age, and it is still happening in many areas. So there are so many other debates. I will try to wind up. There are many other issues, and there was one question which I have in my mind. We can perhaps discuss these vital questions on some other platforms. There are, of course, tussles between Pravritti Marga and Nivritti Marga, and Dharmaśāstra had to revise itself in different times. There is a debate about Dev and Purushkara, and some Dharmaśāstrakaras say that like the two wheels of a chariot, both these are the two wheels of the Jivan Rath, etc. Yatha ekena chakrena na rathasya gatir bhavet. Dev or Purushkar, both of them are equally to be depended on. Some say that some are the Devvadins, some are the Purushkarvadins, so debate between them. But the very important thing, which I will try to finish within 10 minutes, this of course I should have given more time. There are debates on the women's rights and marriage and Stri Dhan, and very interesting debates, you see. And Yakivalkya believes in the plurality. He says that there are diverse views with regard to Stri Dhana and Stri Dai, etc. And a decision should be taken by Nyaya. The Nyaya here comprises three facets: the practice of the elders who are reliable, the prevalence and the precedence, and the prevalence and the precedence. So now what is the value of our legal system, which got eroded during the British regime? That William Jones forgot about this whole setup, that there are so many views in the Dharmaśāstras, then how to decide? Then the practices of the elders, that means the citation, as they do in the courts, that decide the earlier version, that High Court or Supreme Court had given this verdict. So these verdicts of the elders, they should be considered when there is a divergence of views. Then the prevalence should be considered, and then the precedent should be considered. And considering these two, then Nyaya should be done. This is what Yakivalkya says. So William Jones believed in one unitary system, because Hindus have one Parabrahman, one reality, one Dharmaśāstra, and there can be only verdict on any debatable issue. And if any contentious issue comes in his court, he will consult Manu and give only, he will say that this can be only the verdict. Then the Pandits were implied in his court. There was a post of the Pandit or Dastur for the whatever be for the other religious priest, and they told him that there are divergence. There is a divergence of views, and you have to consider the other views also. He said that you are not reading your tradition properly. There can be only one view. There can be only one verdict. So this outlook, you see, he gave us, and so about there were lively debates, and the whole system of Vāda created in Dharmaśāstras, like Nyaya Shastra. when it talks of Vāda, it creates several categories of 14 categories: Praman, Prameya, Sanshay, Prayojan, Drashtant, Siddhant, Chaljati, Nigrah, Sthan, etc. In the same way, Dharmaśāstras have these categories, that there will be a Vādin, Prativādin, and there will be a Pratigya. So several Smritis talk about this Vāda paradigm, that this Pratigya, Sadhan, Pramana, Sadhya, Vivada, and Siddhi, that they, instead of Upnaya and Nigman, they would say Vivada and Siddhi, because they are talking of the judicial courts, where the justice is being done as per the Dharmaśāstra text. So there, these categories and the concepts, the conceptual framework may differ a little. So Pratigya very much matters. As Narada says, in our modern day courts also, what is the statement by the petitioner? I say that I am not guilty. So that will be his Pratigya Vakya, and reasons as per Hetu, Nigman, Upnay, they will be done by the leaders, by the lawyers speaking on his behalf. So you can apply the whole concept of Panchavaya Vakya and the whole Vāda framework to the debates in our legal courts, to the debates in our parliaments. That point also I wanted to make during the course of our talks last 2 days. But Narada lays a lot of emphasis on weightage on Pratigya, the statement of the disputant, and the affidavit of the petitioner. And the Pratigya is lacking. He said that Pratigya should be framed in a very proper way. Otherwise, he will lose the case. Then the Vādin will suffer. Sarastu Vyavaharanam Pratigya Samudarata, etc. And the whole gamut of these terms is there. Purva Paksha and Uttar Paksha. The Brahaspati lays down 4 steps of the judicial process involving debate: Purva Paksha, Uttar Paksha, then Kriya Pada, specifying the region, specifying the action to be taken, and Nirnaya, the judgment. And then Shukra has given so many categories, you see. The second category by Brahaspati is Uttara. And Shukra says that Uttara has 4 categories, a very logistic and scientific division. The way they debate in modern day courts also. So Satya, factual, Mithya, false, and Pratyavaskandana, that is partial acceptance with a view to denounce the case as presented by the petitioner on behalf of the respondent. Even in the legal documents, you will see that the respondent or the lawyer of the respondent would say this is accepted, but then he will deny the other side. So this is called Pratyavaskandana and Purvabhyasa Vidhi, a method involving citations of previous arguments and victory acquired by the respondent in the same or similar cases. Very important. This is also citing the earlier cases. And this structure is followed, you see, even today. And Chaljati, Nigrasthana, they are also very important in the debates in the legal courts. Dharmaśāstras say. Narada condemns Vakchal, of course. So Katyayan, Brahaspati, and Shukra discuss certain defects in language. Right from Mahabharata, the quality of debate and discourse and the whole syntax and semantics they are discussing, that is very important. So Anyartham, Arthahinam, Pramanagama, Varjitam, lack of proofs, and Hinadikam, the mistakes of omissions and commissions, and Brashtam, corrupt statement. All these are the blemishes. Then I will take 5 more minutes because this is very interesting. There are different views. I think Professor Mathur will discuss it. It is his area, of course. But very interesting views about the treatment to women. There are verdicts by some Dharmaśāstrakaras that death sentence should be given to a rapist. Katyayana Smriti says, and Apastambha Dharma Sutra also says, if Shudra molests an Arya, then he should be sentenced to death. But Katyayana Smriti makes it a general verdict for all, that any man molesting any lady should be sentenced to death. But other Manu would give different verdicts for Brahmana and Shudra. He will say that Brahmana cannot be sentenced to death and he should better be expelled, and Shudra can be sentenced to death. These are different. He has his own reasons. I have high regards for Manu, but they are not applicable now. Now we can say that in one region at one time, the verdicts of Manu might have had some relevance. In other region, during his own times, they were not relevant at all. So one question I want to raise here is, and it has been a debatable question. I have written a paper there on it and it is published. So was there a provision for divorce in Dharmaśāstras? There are so many citations you can cite from Dharmaśāstras that this marriage relationship of marriage is irrevocable. It is a sacrament and it cannot be broken. But then there are provisions and there are words. There is a whole set of categories of a divorce. This moksha and adhivedana. And there are a lot of discussions are there. How to have moksha between husband. Moksha is not in the sense of nirvana in the philosophy. Moksha chutkara. So getting rid of his wife by the husband and the wife getting rid of her husband, that is moksha. Kautilya talks of moksha and the provisions for were there. And Manu talks of adhivedana. Adhivedana is keeping your wife separate. Maybe in one room in your own house. If he has committed, if she has committed some vichara, you provide for her well-being, give her food, but stop all relationship with her. Or you see that she lives in a separate house or something like that. So many, it is a kind of divorce, you see. So there is a partial divorce. Adhivedana itself has so many categories. I have cited all of them, and unfortunately, this was something I would have loved to talk it, because I'm very happy that there is so much liberty in Dharmaśāstras, and in practice, much more liberty was there, because we have examples of ladies forsaking their men and men forsaking their, and Parashar, you see, what a liberal attitude he has. Manu said that even if he is important, even if he is suffering from leprosy, a woman would not desert her husband. But Parashar says that if he is plebe or if he is important, if he suffers from such an incurable disease, infectious disease, if he is a criminal, then also a woman has a right to. And very beautiful, you see, descriptions, even in Yamasmriti. He says that if there is some kind of atrocity on the girl married in a family, the kins of that girl would report it to the Rajpurushas, and with the help of the Rajpurushas, they will forcefully enter the house of their in-laws and rescue that girl. Very specifically, this provision is cited. You see, what a variety of views, and what an expansion of ideas in Dharmaśāstras. So with this, I had all these lines here, you see, in favor of divorce, of course, and against divorce. And there is a modern scholar, Dharmavir. He is a Dalit thinker. For some years, I have not heard of him and I have not seen his writings. He was very much talked about in the last decades of 20th century, and he became a sort of icon in the community. So he condemns all the Dharmaśāstras, that there is not even a word for divorce in Sanskrit language itself. I am citing so many, I am giving a terminology in the periphery of divorce, that this Adhivedan and some other terms also are there, which are noted here. So maybe that I say many bitter things when I talk of this whole Dharmaśāstra tradition, and it's, to me, it's a very living tradition of debates and dialogues, and these debates and dialogues should be allowed to happen. We could have actually taken only one such issue, because I had to, you see, wind up and hurry up, and so many vyavaharas will go in the courts, their disputes, and the disputes between husband and wife. What will be the provision if there is a dispute? There is a separate court for looking into the vyavaharas if disputes between husband and wife is there, which the Purana has prescribed. So I stop over here, and I now ask Professor Ashutosh Dayal Mathur to make his remarks as an expert.
My namaskars to everyone. I am definitely beholden to Professor Tripathi. Extremely grateful to him for giving me this opportunity of addressing this very august audience. I want to start with making a few comments. See, when we talk of Dharmaśāstra, I think we need to distinguish between the understanding of dharma, which is there among common people, and the understanding of dharma within the intellectual tradition. And somehow our intellectual tradition has been constantly in communion with the common man. Therefore, a lot of things from the loka enter into Shastra. And if I may say, the intellectual tradition is sometimes hijacked by the understanding, the lesser understanding of the people who are not very familiar with the dharma as such. So this is one remark. Most people even today genuinely believe that dharma is something divine. Dharma is something which is beyond the understanding of ordinary mortals. It is indriyati, it is vacham agochar, etc., etc. But the understanding of Dharmaśāstra, the whole tradition, if we look at it carefully, leaving out those passages and leaving out those parts which I believe are a kind of a contamination, we will see that the understanding of Dharmaśāstra, of Dharma itself and of Shastra itself, is very different. According to Dharmaśāstra, there is no subject in Dharmaśāstra which is beyond any discussion and beyond any debate. Dharma can be seen as in two parts. There are two parts of dharma. One is the drishta part, the other is the adrishta part. The actions, the rituals, whose processes and whose results can be known through our normal means of understanding, our normal means of knowledge, that is pratyaksha, anuman, tarka, etc. Those are the drishta ones. But the rituals, kriyas, anushtanas, prakriyas, phalas, about which we can know only through either through the Ved or texts based on Veda or on the tradition based on Ved in inverted commas, are supposed to be adrishta. And in both these areas, tarka, discussion, debate has been accepted as an integral part. If I may refer to some of these passages in Brahman Granthas, where we know that for every smallest, minutest part of a ritual, they start giving arguments. They give various options. It can be done in this way, it can be done in this way, it can be done in the third manner or in the fourth way. And they have arguments. And on the basis of arguments, they try to establish the right means of performing even what is called a ritual, which actually might fall in the domain of the divine and the supernatural. As similarly, when we talk of Mimamsa, which is the source book, source text, or the source tradition for understanding ritual, I came across some very interesting references while discussing the validity of smritis. The Mimamsaka Shabar Bhashya has even accepted the possibility of Smritikars deliberately making false rules to serve their own particular selfish interests. Now, this is a very remarkable kind of an approach. And the example that they have given is that when there is a particular ritual in which the youp has to be covered with a piece of cloth, so there is discussions about the size of the piece of cloth. Is it to be a big piece of cloth or a small piece of cloth? And there it is said that those who have given the idea, or those who have proposed the rule of a large piece of cloth being used to cover the youp, are selfish purohits, selfish priests, who have said this so that they can take away a big piece of cloth home. Now, this I thought was a remarkable, very, very revolutionary kind of a statement to make in a text which seeks to promote ritual, which seeks all validity from Veda and supernatural elements. So with this, if this is the attitude of our scholars, then the entire system of Adrishta also falls within the domain of debate, discussion, and even allows us to question the validity, not just the validity, but even the intent and the motive of the people making rules. That's a very, very revolutionary kind of an idea, I would say. Then similarly, the very attitude of Shastra about Dharma is very interesting. With the passage of time, Kala, the Desha Kram se, Kala Kram se, the meanings of Smritis will change. The text and reading, they will start discussing the correct reading, whether this is the correct reading or that is the correct reading. What is the right interpretation? And not just the reading and interpretation, but whether a certain rule is acceptable at all or not. Rules given in Shruti and Smriti can become unacceptable if they are Loka Viruddha and Loka Vidvishta. That is, if people begin to detest some rules, they cannot then be implemented. For example, there is this very interesting rule, one of the rules in Manusmriti about inheritance, that upon the death of a man, all his property should go to his eldest son. That is one of the rules. There are many other possibilities. But on the other hand, Vijnaneshwar has proposed equal distribution of property among all the sons. So Yagyavalkya, the commentator of Yagyavalkya, that is Vijnaneshwar, says here, Ayam Vishamaha Vibhagaha Shastra Drishtaha. Ayam Vishamaha Vibhagaha Shastra Drishtaha is very much given in the Shastra. Tathapi Lok Vidvishtatvat na Anushtheya. Because now people detest it, people don't like it. I mean, imagine, sir, that that people are given the freedom to detest, to begin to dislike, and therefore to reject something which is written in the Shastra. So people's interests change, people's understandings of life change, people's beliefs change, and on that basis, circumstances in the society change, and therefore all rules of dharma are open to change and amendment. Jimutavahan, and commenting on the same rule, says, Adyatananam bhaktyatichaya bhavat samabhaga eva loke drishyate uddharhara jeshtha bhavacha. That is, nowadays we don't have such great elder brothers who will actually deserve a special share in father's property, and nor do we have such younger brothers who may be absolutely devoted to their elder brothers. So society, the reality of the society, the reality of life has to be looked at, and that should be the determining factor in what dharma should be. Therefore, all sons get an equal share. In Dharmaśāstra, Vyavahara or law is obviously, as Professor Tripathi has already mentioned, is a very fertile, is actually the state for, is actually the arena for all debates. On every issue, there will be two views. One interpretation, one rule will be in favor of one party, and the other party will obviously come and contest it. And whenever there is a contest in a Nyaya Sabha, there is Vāda. If people don't contest, if people don't debate, then there can be no Vāda. And we have several instances which Professor Tripathi has already pointed out, but I want to point out some more where there is a very sharp debate, very sharp, very aggressive, if I can use that expression, of debate between different opposite parties on various issues. For example, this issue of a sonless widow inheriting a husband's share in property. Yagyavalkya has, in giving the order of inheritors, placed the wife at the first place. Patni duhitarah chaiva. That is how his shlok begins. But the Purva Paksh, which is not in favor of giving this right to the widow, has cited several smritis which give a different order of succession. If the property might go to the mother of the deceased, to the father of the deceased, or the brothers of the deceased. And the basic argument with the Purva Paksh is trying to give is that, look, if we accept Yagyavalkya's smriti, then all other smritis become anavakasha. Then there is no scope for them. But a simple argument given by Vijnaneshwar there is that, look, if on this ground you want to reject Yagyavalkya, then on similar grounds, we will have to reject your smritis, because if we accept your smritis, then my smriti, that is Yagyavalkya smriti, becomes anavakasha. And therefore, when on both the positions, if the same dosh comes, the same fault applies, then we need some other stronger argument. This issue may not be able to, we may not be able to solve this issue simply on the basis of citation, simply on the basis of Shastra. So now let us look for more arguments. So the Purva Pakshi comes out with very interesting arguments. And Vijnaneshwar has rebutted each one of them equally well. So one of the arguments is that a woman as such does not deserve any property because she doesn't have the right to perform rituals, Vedic rituals particularly, and wealth is required only for performance of Vedic rituals. And therefore, since a woman is not allowed to perform Vedic rituals, therefore he does not have any share in property. Now, this Vijnaneshwar has again said, look, I refuse to believe that wealth is only for Vedic rituals. All other worldly needs are to be satisfied only with the help of wealth, and without money you can't even have food and clothing and shelter. Therefore, I don't accept the idea that wealth, the sole purpose of wealth is performance of Vedic ritual. And even if we grant that wealth is required for performing ritual, what about Puranic ritual? You give too much of importance to ritual, therefore let me handle you on that level. What about Puranic ritual? All women have the right to perform Puranic ritual, and if you deny them any share in property, they will not be able to perform their rituals, Puranic rituals. A similar argument comes here that's very interesting about the Purva Paksh says that, look, a woman does not have any right, a widow doesn't have any right to property because it is the primary duty of a widow to go and commit sati. That is her primary dharma. Therefore, if that is the dharma, then where does the question of inheriting the husband's property arise? Now, that again is very interestingly, very cleverly argued by Vijnaneshwar again. He says, look, I agree that there are many smritis which prescribe sati as a duty of the woman, but sati is not the primary duty, because ultimately what can a woman obtain by committing sati? That is a few more years in heaven with their deceased husband. But living in heaven and going to heaven is not the highest goal in Indian philosophy. That is moksha. And a woman who really wants to obtain moksha should not commit sati. She should rather continue to live and perform all the duties of her husband, and that is what will ensure moksha to her. Therefore, moksha is a superior goal in Indian philosophy. Therefore, what we call today sati is not an essential practice of Hinduism, and therefore a woman must be allowed to inherit her husband's property. Then again, as Professor Tripathi was mentioning, the 4 stages of contests or cases or litigation. Every point you have to give your arguments. Pratigya has to be supported with suitable evidence. Uttar has to be supported with suitable evidence. And the very interesting point I wish to mention here is that when judges are expected to write their judgments, they must write down every reason why they have come to a certain conclusion, why they have accepted certain evidence, why they have not accepted certain evidence, why have they accepted the validity of a document, why they have not accepted the validity of a document. So every judgment has to be a reasoned judgment as we know it now. Then another point, simple point, is that there are two kinds of debates happening within Dharmaśāstra. One, I will say, is a silent debate, as sir was mentioning the other day. Silent debate, I would mean, by silent debate, I mean the debates between various smritis. They don't say anything. They only make their vidhi and nishedh. They only present their prescriptions and prohibitions. There is no comment. There is no reason. And yet smritis continuously reject what the past smritis have said and try to give a different view on various issues. So this is a kind of a silent debate without getting into any tu meme with the predecessors. But the tikakars and the nibandhakars are the real fighters in Dharmaśāstra. For example, I mentioned Vijnaneshwar. Medhatiti speaks a lot. These are the ones who have given detailed arguments, detailed reasons for and against various positions. So these are more vocal debates, I would like. So there is a silent debate and there is a vocal debate. Then another interesting point that I can talk of dharma is that dharma has two parts essentially. One is achar, the other is vyavhar. Achar is general social conduct, ritual conduct, moral conduct. But vyavhar is litigation, something which a dispute which goes to the court of a king. This, I think, is a very interesting idea. And suddenly we find a lot of achar moving into the field of vyavhar. So long as it is within the field of achar, it's a moral law. It could be a ritual law, and there is no punishment, no penalty as such prescribed. There could be prayashchit, it could be very dangerous at times. But the moment a rule of achar enters the arena of vyavhar, then it becomes more important because now it can be contested. For example, we have this shloka. Abhivadanashilasya nittam vruddhopasevina chattvaritasya vardante ayurvidya yasho balam. This is the rule of dharma or achara. But serving the aged, looking after our parents can at the most fetch us swarga. And yet there is no direct cause and effect relationship between serving the elderly and the fruit, the result that is attributed to it. But the moment in contemporary law, the moment the criminal procedure code says that, look, if you don't look after your parents can seek support of the court, and you will have to give them a monthly some amount to take care of needs. Sons have no inherent right in staying in the father's house, in the parents' house. This is a very recent judgment from the courts. So this is how achar suddenly turns into vyavahar, and that is where dharma as a vyavahar becomes a very important element in our understanding of life. Again, dharma, the area of Dharmaśāstra is very, very wide, and there are large number of texts and areas which it covers. So I would like to comment on a couple of things that you just said in your presentation today. This separate laws for Hindus and Muslims and various denominations has been the practice even in the pre-British area, and I have got evidence from earliest Sultanate period. Whenever these Muslim kings, so-called Muslim kings, came to India, they started setting up the Qazi's Adalats. But in each Qazi's Adalat, a Pandit was assigned to aid and advise the Qazi on the personal laws of the Hindus. Then similarly, this Varna and Jati problem, as you have already said, it is their right in Manusmriti. There is no Varna even in Manusmriti. The moment they say that all these jatis have come about, hundreds of jatis have come about because of intermarriages, that means they've already conceded that the 4 Varna system has already collapsed right in the Manusmriti period or even before that. But since most people try to attribute everything to Manu and rightly or wrongly make him the hero or the villain, So I would say that even in Manusmriti, this Varna Sankar is a serious issue, and that the whole Varna system seems to have collapsed. Jati has always been considered a very important element in determining guilt and determining the quantum of sentence in most of the crimes in Dharmaśāstra. That again is a very thing that we need to ponder. And now, of course, we are living in the age of democracy where everybody is equal. So this kind of caste-based discrimination in determining guilt and in determining the quantum of sentence cannot be accepted. And so in the end, I would like to say that Dharmaśāstra has shown us the way of how to resolve many of these controversies. Desh and Kal continue to be very important. People's likes and dislikes continue to be a very, very important point. So we have to decide what is good for us in this age, in this society. No Shastra, no tradition, not even social customs can bind us to what we don't think is right. And every generation, therefore, has a right, according to Dharmaśāstra, or according to my understanding of Dharmaśāstra, to decide what is the best for them and to live according to their own genius. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Mathur, for substantiating my remarks and presenting a very broad perspective of the Dharmaśāstra and very lively Vadas that are happening in the Dharmaśāstras you talked about. I'm sorry, I forgot to introduce Professor Mathur. He is known to most of us, I think, but maybe some persons who are from other subjects, I would like to say a few words about him, which I should have done earlier. Professor Mathur has been teaching in St. Stephen's College since 1981. He has worked there in the Department of Sanskrit for more than 41 years. And he is held as one of the great authorities on Dharmaśāstra amongst us. And the best thing which I very much like about Professor Mathur is that he is highly regarded by his students as a teacher. This is very valuable thing for me, because this value is vanishing from our teaching community, that the Shishyas acknowledge that they have been the students of such a guru. So Professor Mathur has produced many scholars from his college who are now professors or well-known scholars. You will listen to Rishi Raj Pathak on the inaugural day here, this Samagana. He is a well-known scholar. He is a product of Dr. Mathur's institution from his department. Professor Balram Shukla, who is one of the luminaries of Sanskrit world, he is a student of Professor Mathur. And Professor Mathur has guided several research scholars on topics related to Dharmaśāstra. He himself worked for his doctoral research on Dharmaśāstra, and his work on Dharmaśāstra, perhaps under the title Hindu Law, Medieval Hindu Law, has been published by Oxford University Press. So it was very, very fortunate for us for this workshop that Professor Mathur kindly agreed to address this gathering, and I again thank him for these very pertinent remarks. So many other things can be said. These are very burning problems also are there, and you see, you rightly pointed out that this Vijnaneshwar, what a radical thinker he is. But I read this Bharati Chintan Paramparaye by some Damodaran. It's a very good work. He has made a survey of satis in Bengal. So he says that when the Bengal kings accepted the system of Vijnaneshwar, which was very liberal for ladies, and prescribed that ladies can inherit the property, the sati cases were multiplied in Bengal to thousands. Say if there were 30,000 there were 3,000 cases of sati in other provinces. In a year, there were 7,000 reported in Bengal, because the lady is to inherit the property. So she is deliberately, forcibly burnt. तो ये स्त्री को जलाने की घटनाएं बढ़ गई. So the ground realities, the radical thought of Dharmaśāstra and the kings so liberal, who accept that, what a reaction amongst the conservatives, among the vested interest it generates. So some very such instances also we have to keep in our view, and these dialogues, I think, will go on in the field of Dharmaśāstra and amongst us also. I think that we can have some discussion for 10 minutes, and the participants are welcome to raise their comments, particularly their queries, but be very brief. They can come forward, and I think Professor Mathur, I will ask if there are any such issues. If I can reply, I would. Otherwise, I would ask Professor Mathur, who is the real authority, to respond to them. Is there any question on the two speeches just made? Any question or comment? If there is none,
मैं कुछ कहना चाहता हूं आचार्य जी. एक जिज्ञासा है कि क्या मुसलमानों के आने के बाद ये अस्पृश्यता का संदर्भ हमारे वहां आकारित हुआ है? उनका कालिक संबंध क्या हो सकता, कहां से वो शुरू हुआ होगा?
प्रोफेसर माथुर बोल कह दें.
टाइम फैक्टर कोई निश्चित किया जा सकता है कि अस्पृश्यता का विधान धर्मशास्त्र में कब से आया?
ठीक है, बहुत अच्छा प्रश्न है. प्रोफेसर माथुर जैसा कहना चाहें. मेरे ख्याल में तो पहले से रहा है, लेकिन प्रोफेसर माथुर जैसा.
नहीं, मैं ऐसा सोचता हूं कि मनुस्मृति में हो सकता है कि कुछ प्रक्षिप्त भाग हो.
हाँ, वो तो ठीक है.
तो उसी के कारण ऐसा कुछ हो सकता है.
सर, मैं ये निवेदन करना चाहता हूं कि मुझे स्वयं स्मरण नहीं आ रहा, लेकिन ये सिर्फ प्रक्षेप कह देने से शायद हम छुटकारा पा सकेंगे. लेकिन अच्छा, मान लीजिए अस्पृश्यता ना हो, लेकिन और बहुत सी जो उनके विषय में बातें कही गई जिसमें उनको बहुत सारे अधिकारों से वंचित किया. मैं सिर्फ शिक्षा के अधिकार से बात नहीं कर रहा, सामाजिक बहुत सारे धन कमाने का अधिकार. और अस्पृश्यता से भी बड़ी एक समस्या सर मैं जो रखनी चाहता हूँ, वो दास तक, स्लेवरी. हम उसको कैसे भूल जाते? स्लेवरी इतनी रैम्पेंट हमारे देश में शुरू के धर्मशास्त्रों से, जहां से आपने धर्मशास्त्र को उठाया, जहां से धर्मशास्त्र शुरू हो रहा है, वहीं से स्लेवरी का कॉन्सेप्ट शुरू हो रहा है. उनको धर्म में, उनको संपत्ति में कोई अधिकार नहीं रखना, उनको अपने फिजिकल बॉडी पे कोई अधिकार नहीं है. एंड एलिमेंट्स लाइक the owners of slaves having full right over the body of the women slave. ये जो बड़ी घातक बातें हैं, ये धर्मशास्त्र में जो लिखी हुई हैं. ये ठीक है कि later period we find people trying to fine tune these people, and very again in the medieval period we find slaves getting back the right to property. Slaves, Manu says, in no circumstance can a slave obtain freedom at all. But this rule is changed. This rule is changed in the medieval period by the time we come to the 7th, 8th century. And they say, look, a slave can obtain freedom by making whatever the payment or whatever. So there are interesting things which are happening. But slavery, unfortunately, is one area which people who are reading Dharmaśāstra have not been able to address and not look at very carefully. And unfortunately, slavery continues even in 21st century. Child slaves, women slaves, they are present in huge numbers. They're present in huge numbers.
सफेद दिखाइए. एक मिनट.
आप अपना माइक म्यूट कर लीजिए, उनको सुनने दीजिए हम लोगों को. हाँ.
So, Asprishata, I may not have answered, but I have raised this very different issue of slavery being present and millions and thousands of slaves being sold in the markets. And this was done by all kings. Whichever king will win over any land, the first thing he will do is to pick slaves and take them to his own country to do their work, or to turn them into soldiers. So this is one very important issue which we need to look at.
I would like to make one or two remarks. Professor Bhatt has raised very pertinent question, very important question. I would say that the idea of untouchability or practice of untouchability was very much there long before the Muslims rule came. You see, Shankaracharya's encounter with the Chandala scavenger, and the way Shankaracharya addresses him. That is another thing, that it is even a mythical garb, and that Chandala actually was Shiva. But the Chandala arguing with Shankaracharya that you are preaching Advaita Vāda, but there is a dichotomy between your theory and practice. Whom you are asking to move away? Are you asking to move away the supreme Brahman which is with me and within you also? Some such thing he says. So Shankaracharya had to agree, but that was very much in practice. If he had been a common Chandala, he would have been kicked and moved away, and he would have been sentenced by the king that coming in the way of such a great Brahman, great revered figure. And these things actually happened. Very, very such horrible things, you see. If you read our literature, Premchand's stories in Hindi, what they are doing to the Shudras, they are talking of the ground realities. They are seeing what is happening in the villages, what the Jamidars or even the Brahmins are doing to them. In Bengal, most horrible thing, you see, if you read Mahashweta Devi's stories, stark realism, you see, they had to hang something like pipa, which they have to play if they at all entered the city. Otherwise they are not allowed the city. उसको बहुत जोर जोर से बजाएंगे कि वो कोई चांडाल आ रहा है तो सब लोग दूर हट जाए ताकि उसकी हवा भी ना लग जाए. वो कितना अत्याचार होता रहा है ये सब. The Dharmaśāstras, great thinkers, they are providing alternate theories and systems. Many of them are very liberal. But how? Why the Hindus, why the society moved so away from them, and why vested interest worked to that extent? About this slavery, one thing I would add, I agree with Professor Mathur that it is a stigma in our society that slavery is there. And even Draupadi is considered as a slave. Yudhishthira, Bhim, Arjun, Nakul, Sahadeva, they become slaves when they are defeated in the Duryodhana. So they have to serve like slaves, not ordinary servants or pratiharas. They become slaves. They can be treated anyway. Their body belongs to their owner. So, but even then, looking to Sanskrit literature, finding very, very beautiful descriptions of dasis there, you see, and the way they are treated. Even Manu says that a householder should not eat unless he has feeded the slaves in his house. So this to an extent, this cast an impact on the Orthodox society also. There are very cruel people. They are very extremely cruel. Rakshasas are there in the Jamidars. They are treating the Shudras or slaves in a very inhuman way. That is true. But the verdicts of the Dharmaśāstras about human treatment to slaves, they accept that slavery is there. It is reality. Harishchandra sells himself, and Shebya, his queen, sells herself to become slave, and anything can be done to them as slaves. So this slavery is there right from Vedic age. And Vaishyavritti is also there, but that is a very glorified picture of our society. As I write from Rigveda, you find the descriptions of courtesans, and even in Arthashastra, there are provisions, and that is a very exalted institution. I appreciate that. But the slavery was very much there. But considering the treatment to slaves given in other countries, to blacks by the whites, that the treatment given to slaves in India perhaps was much more human. That much I can say. If there is any other question, there is only 3 or 4 minutes time. Otherwise, we'll move to.
Sir, one question.
Pardon?
हेलो
There is recently.
हेलो, मेरी आवाज आ रही है?
आ रही है,
हाँ जी,
बोलिए।
बोलिए।
लेट दी लेडी से
हाँ
व्हाटएवर शी इज सेइंग।
हाँ 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 हाँ। सबसे पहले तो सबको, त्रिपाठी जी को, माथुर जी को और सब विद्वान जनों को मेरा नमस्कार। मैं धैर्या मांकड़ और भट्ट सर जो यहाँ उपस्थित है उनकी विद्यार्थिनी हूँ। त्रिपाठी जी का जो वक्तव्य था, उन्होंने पारसी की बात की और पारसी कम्युनिटी के बारे में उन्होंने बताया कि वो उनकी संख्या कम हो रही है। तो उनके बारे में मुझे कुछ यूट्यूब में मैं लेक्चर सुन रही थी। एक अभिजीत चावड़ा करके है इतिहासविद, और उनका लेक्चर था आर्यन इन्वेजन थियरी पे। तो उन्होंने कहा था कि एक्चुअली आर्यंस बाहर से नहीं आए थे, यहाँ से ही थे। और कश्यप ऋषि की जो संतानें थी, देव और असुर, उनमें से असुर जो थे वो ईरानी यानी हमारी दुश्मनावट थी और वो ईरान चले गए थे। और वही पारसी कम्युनिटी है और अभी हमें कोई दुश्मनी नहीं है उनके साथ। और यानी पारसीज वेर नॉट आउटसाइडर, they are from India and they migrate to Iran and फिर ये लोग वापस आ गए 1000 साल पहले। तो ये बात क्या सही है?
हाँ, बहुत धन्यवाद। और सही है। अभिजीत जी के पहले बहुत महान इतिहासविद और पुरातत्वविद और हम लोगों के बीच में एक महान विभूति प्रोफेसर वासुदेव शरण अग्रवाल इस पर बहुत विस्तार से कह चुके हैं। और उन्हीं का मत मैंने उद्धृत भी किया है कि महाभारत में वो किस तरह से प्रदर्शित करते हैं कि जो हरि मेधस है वो अहुर मजदा है और पूरा पारसी धर्म का उसमें विवरण है। तो उन्होंने विस्तार से इस पर लिखा है कि कौन सी शाखा आर्यों की ईरान की तरफ चली गई और उनमें से कौन असुर का तो मतलब ही होता है जो प्राण शक्ति से संपन्न हो। और उनकी बड़ी कल्चर थी, असीरियन कल्चर, महान उनकी संस्कृति रही है और उनसे हमारे बहुत अच्छे संबंध रहे। ईरान से अत्यंत प्राचीन काल से, वैदिक काल से ही लगाकर, इसको हम स्वीकार करते हैं। पर यह बहुत सीधा इसका संबंध आज के विषय से नहीं है। अन्य कोई यदि प्रश्न हो तो 1 मिनट में कर सकते हैं। हाँ, संगीता।
यस, नमस्ते सर। मेरा जो प्रश्न है वो ये है कि जो what is the main reason to disgrace women in our actual society, and why we consider women as in second sex or second jati in our धर्मशास्त्र? मतलब धर्मशास्त्र क्या ऐसा रोल उन्होंने प्ले किया कि आई एम नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट दिल्ली और मुंबई और बिग सिटीज, बट इन जनरल हम जो भारत में you know what we see that women are actually as in they treated as in second sex. So what are the main causes, or I mean I just want to know this.
बहुत अच्छा सवाल है और थोड़ा सा कॉम्प्लिकेटेड सवाल है। ये एक पूरी हिस्टोरिकल प्रोसेस है। मैट्रियार्कल सोसाइटी से पेट्रियार्कल सोसाइटी की तरफ हम जब चले तो ये एक ऐसी प्रक्रिया थी। और इसमें क्या है कि सत्ता का खेल होता है। जिसके हाथ में ताकत होती है वो शोषण करता है, जिसके पास ताकत होती है, सत्ता होती है, वो उसमें एक्सप्लॉइट करने की प्रवृत्ति स्वतः आ जाती है। ये मूलभूत प्रवृत्ति है, ये हम सबके भीतर है। ऐसा कुछ नहीं है कि मेरे भीतर नहीं हो। मैं पति हूं तो मैं कई बार जो है अपनी पत्नी को आदेश दे सकता हूं कि पानी भर करके लाना, जरा रख देना, मेरा लेक्चर शुरू हो सकता है। माई वाइफ may be more qualified, she may be an educated lady, but still this samskara is there with this patriarchal samskara is there in our society. It is everywhere in all the countries, but I think the times are changing and the scenario would change. और एक मेरे प्रिय लेखक हैं जर्मनी के, हालांकि इसका कोई संबंध नहीं है आज के चर्चा से। एक ग्विंटर ग्रास, एक जर्मन भाषा के कथाकार हैं, नोबेल पुरस्कार भी उनको मिला। उनका उपन्यास है द फ्लाउंडर, बहुत बृहत्काय उपन्यास है। तो वो पूरा सृष्टि का विकास किस तरह से हुआ है इस पर वो उनका उपन्यास है। और उन्होंने उसमें दिखाया कि किस तरह से मातृ प्रधान जो हमारा समाज था वो पितृ प्रधान जो बना, तो उससे कैसे बुराइयां पैदा होती गई। और उसमें उन्होंने परिकल्पना की कि फिर से यदि if the matriarchal society is re-established, then many of these evils might be eradicated. तो उसकी वो परिकल्पना उसमें करते हैं। बहुत इंटरेस्टिंग वो है वो उपन्यास। तो ऐसी आशा की जा सकती है कि महिलाएं सच्चाई के पथ पर चलें और हस्तक्षेप करें और अपने आप को एसर्ट करें और ये प्रमाणित करें कि आप लोग जो गुणगान करते हैं कि दुर्गा का देश है और माँ भगवती सर्वशक्तिमती उसकी उपासना आप करते हैं, तो उसका जो विग्रह है उसका भी समादर करना सीखिए। मैं बहुत ज्यादा इसको महत्व नहीं देता, यत्र नार्यस्तु पूज्यन्ते रमन्ते तत्र देवता, ये सब बड़ी, जिसको गीताकार ने श्री कृष्ण पुष्पिताम वाचम कहा है, ये फ्लावरी लैंग्वेज है। जो मनु का इंटरेस्ट ये है, बहुत सुंदर और बड़ी काव्यात्मक पंक्ति है उसके आगे पीछे, कि महिलाओं को खुश रखना चाहिए क्योंकि वो फील्ड है, खेती है हमारे लिए। वो संतान तो लड़का तो वही देंगी, नहीं तो कहाँ से फिर वेदज्ञ और यज्ञ करने वाली संतान पैदा होगी। तो अच्छा लड़का पैदा करने के लिए उनको खुश रखो और गृहस्थी चलाने, ये बहुत प्रैक्टिकल है उस समाज के लिए। मनु का बहुत आदर करता हूँ, लेकिन जो पूरा पुरुषवादी दृष्टि, अच्छा एक बात ये कहने से रह गई कि जितने सारे धर्मशास्त्र हैं वो सब पुरुषों के द्वारा, पुरुषों की दृष्टि से लिखे गए हैं। किसी महिला ने अगर धर्मशास्त्र लिखा हो तो मुझे पता नहीं, जबकि इतनी बड़ी बड़ी विदुषियां हुई, गार्गी हुई। ये भी एक सवाल है जो मैंने बहुत सारे सवाल किए और प्रोफेसर माथुर जी ने बहुत सुंदर ढंग से प्रतिपादित किया, स्वीकार भी किया, जो ग्राउंड रियलिटी है वो ये रही है। लेकिन एक प्रश्न यह भी है कि सारे धर्मशास्त्र पुरुषों के द्वारा लिखे गए हैं, तो क्या उसमें पुरुषों के वर्चस्व की दृष्टि प्रतिबिंबित नहीं है? और मेरे हिसाब से तो है। भले ही याज्ञवल्क्य जो कि बहुत सहानुभूति रखते हैं और उनसे ज्यादा सहानुभूति उनकी टीकाकार महिलाओं के प्रति रखते हैं, लेकिन जो पुरुष लिखेगा उसका पुरुषवादी दृष्टिकोण होगा ही। वो अपने महावीर और बुद्ध तक में था, जो कि मुक्त पुरुष हैं, दोनों में वो महिलाओं से बचते हैं और कहते हैं कि नहीं नहीं नहीं, महिलाओं को मत आने देना, बर्बाद हो जाएगा। तो पुरुष कैसे अपने आप को उससे, पुरुष ग्रंथि से मुक्त रख सकता है? तो महिलाओं के लिए, महिलाओं के द्वारा कोई धर्मशास्त्र नहीं लिखा गया। जैसे कि धर्मवीर जिनकी मैं चर्चा कर रहा था, उन्होंने पूरा वात्स्यायन का कामसूत्र रिजेक्ट किया, जो कि बहुत बड़ा टेक्स्ट है मेरे लिए। और वात्स्यायन तो कितनी सहानुभूति अद्भुत है। उन्होंने वेश्याओं के लिए इतनी सुंदर ढंग से सहानुभूति पूर्वक बातें की कि कैसे इनका शोषण होता है। हम लोग समझते हैं कि ये लूट रही हैं, वो वात्स्यायन जानते हैं कि उनको किस तरह से कुचला जाता है, लोग उनकी फीस दिए बिना चले जाते हैं। तो उनसे कैसे निपटना, इसके लिए उन्होंने उसमें वो पूरा फीमेल डिस्कोर्स जो कामसूत्र का है बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण है। वो मेरे हिसाब से कामसूत्र अपने आप में एक धर्मशास्त्र के समकक्ष ग्रंथ है। और वो महिलाओं के लिए, उन्होंने तो गांधर्व विवाह को सर्वश्रेष्ठ माना है। आपके कहते रहे कि 6 विवाहों में ब्राह्म, प्राजापत्य और देव ये सब श्रेष्ठ होंगे। और वात्स्यायन कहते हैं कि मैं भी एक ऋषि हूँ और मेरा कहना है कि गांधर्व विवाह सर्वश्रेष्ठ है। इसमें कोई रूढ़ियां, कोई कर्मकांड ये सब नहीं होते हैं और ये सारे प्रपंच नहीं होते हैं। और वो ये भी कहते हैं कि स्त्री को अधिकार है कि प्रेम के लिए वो घर छोड़ करके चली जाए। अगर पति अत्याचार करता है, वो कोई प्रेमी है, तो चली जाए, नहीं तो सड़ती रही। ये इतना दारुण चित्र उन्होंने उपस्थित किया है। दुर्भगा जाया प्रकरण है कामसूत्र में, आप लोग पढ़िए, मेरे तो रोंगटे खड़े हो जाते हैं। वो कहते हैं कि ये जो दुर्भगा जाया है, अगर कई सोते हैं और एक स्त्री, कुछ स्त्रियां उसमें से उपेक्षित है, तो उनकी कैसी हालत होती है। वो कहते हैं कि जो दुर्भगा है उसके लिए केवल यही एक शरण है कि जो सबसे सीनियर वाइफ है उसकी भक्ति करती रहे, और जो सबसे जूनियर षोडशी युवती जिस पर कि पति अनुरक्त है उसको सजा के संवार के उसके पास ले जाती रहे, तब तक तो उसका गुजारा चलता रहेगा, नहीं तो उसकी और बुरी हालत हो जाएगी। ये वात्स्यायन कामसूत्र में कहते हैं। ये सेक्स की किताब नहीं है कामसूत्र, वो सौंदर्य शास्त्र की, जीवन की किताब है और उसमें धर्मशास्त्र के प्रकरण है। और वात्स्यायन ये नहीं कहते हैं कि काम सबसे बड़ी चीज है, हालांकि काम सेक्स नहीं है, पुरुषार्थ है। वो कहते हैं कि धर्म पुरुषार्थ सबसे बड़ा है, काम उसके बाद है। सारे डिस्कशंस उसमें हैं। तो वो भी एक ग्रंथ है हमारी परंपरा का, उस पर ध्यान जाना चाहिए। और जो मैच्योर लोग हैं उनको तो कम से कम इस दृष्टि से उसको सावधानी से पढ़ना ही चाहिए। तो बहुत सारी बातें हुई, कुछ अधिक समय